Well, again, welcome to Vertical Church Milwaukee. My name is Pastor Jesse, and I'm the lead pastor here. We're just grateful that you are here worshiping with us tonight. Just a quick couple of updates. First off, for those of you who are regulars, Matt and Jill, our worship leader, our worship director, and his wife want to let you know they're doing well. Last week, Matt was shot and carjacked and left on the side of the road, and God has been faithful, and God brought people around him, and it was in the hospital and out of the hospital, and he's at home, and he continues to text me and just tells me to remind you guys, listen, God is faithful and God is working. But if you want to support them, we sent out a meal train this past week, but we're also looking for ways to serve them as well, possibly going over their house and doing some painting or other things. But if you are looking for ways to bless them, just let myself or Ashley know, and we will make sure that we get different ways around them, whether it's painting their house because they were in the middle of painting it when this happened, or adding some more meals to the list. But we want to take care of them. But they do want to let you know that they are doing well. But we're also very thankful for John and Amber coming up and filling in. We're going to have a few different people in the coming weeks because apparently when you get shot in the shoulder, you can't lead worship for a while. That's what Matt's telling me. But we have a lot of people who are going to be filling in, so we're grateful for that. But along with that, this week we have a bunch of things happening. Tomorrow night at our house, we are having our family dinner at 5 o'clock, and it's just an opportunity for us to get together and hang out and have a good time. We are just going to be ordering pizza this time around. It's going to be outside. It looks like it's going to be beautiful weather. So just bring a couple bucks for your family and just come ready to spend some time and build into one another. If you're interested in coming, just talk to my wife or I, and we'll give you the address after the service. And just be ready to spend some good quality time together. And along with that, this week is our prayer week. And what we do, we don't do a whole prayer week. We do a 24-hour prayer as a church. And we'll be sending out a link for that where you can sign up. But what we do is from 5 o'clock on Thursday night until 5 o'clock on Friday night, we fill every hour where we spend time praying for our church family, praying for our fall ministries, praying for what God is doing in this city, and just leading up to kind of our fall weekend, our first kind of launch weekend. And so be looking for that. Get signed up. Take an hour, take 2 hours. But along with that, this year we're doing something a little bit different. On the connections table out back, we have our prayer cards, and it just says, our prayer day on it. It flips over and says, how can I pray for you? Take those, and this week, give them to your neighbors, give them to your coworkers, go up to them and just, hey, we're doing a day of prayer. Half of my time praying is going to be praying for the needs of those around me. We want to be investing in our community. And so if you have a prayer request, I would love for you to fill this out and give it back to me. And just to spend some time praying for those people. And then after you pray for them, text them and let them know, hey, I was praying for you. And, just want to let you know that. So, but on your way, I have like 200 of those cards. Grab them, use them. Some of you have been asking for updated invite cards because we're in a new building. Those are also out there. And there are no longer Saturday nights, but Sunday mornings, because next week, we are moving back to Sunday mornings, 9:30. You're still in this building, but the church that was renting it in the morning is now moving back to their location so we can go back to Sunday mornings as well. So we have a family dinner, a day of prayer, and then we're moving to Sunday mornings. I think that's all we have for now. But again, we want to connect with you on your way out. We don't pass an offering or the connection folder, but Matt will be in the back of the bag. There's the connection cards that are in the seats, and that's just a way for us to pray for you, to know what's going on. If you want to fill that out and drop that in there along with the offering after the service, that would be great. But we are continuing in our Made for This series. You can open up to Exodus 33. And so we're doing this Made for This series basically throughout the entire fall leading into the winter because, a lot of us, we, are getting into this pandemic. We're getting into the political season. We're getting into all this civil unrest. And it's just like, Lord, how do we make it through this time? And it's, a lot of times we just feel like we're just trying to make it. But again, I've been saying this for a long time, and I'm going to continue to argue this, that this isn't a season that we are just getting through. This is a season that God has given us on a silver platter to be the church to a watching world. We were made for a season like this. And so we went through a mini series on prayer, that God is going to use his church in this time. We need to be praying. Now we're going to go into a part of a series. We're going to be talking about our church and what does it mean to be the church in this time, and just kind of a reminder of the different things that we do as a church, because we were made for this. And so these next 2 weeks, we're going to be covering our mission statement and why it's applicable to seasons like this. And our mission statement is to glorify God by loving people and making disciples. We exist as a church to glorify God by loving people, making disciples. And so the loving people, making disciples, I'm going to cover next week. We're going to talk about the Great Commandment and the Great Commission together. But first and foremost, it has to start with this idea of glorifying God. If we are going to make a difference, if we're going to do anything in our world today with our neighbors, again, I've been talking about this a lot lately as well. We can't have tons of programming. We're not allowed to do that right now. So what do we do to minister to people? It's us. When we leave this building, we're praying for people. We're encouraging people. We're looking for opportunities to share scripture with people. We want to be at work. We want to be the light and feet that we would normally do in other ways. And, we want to do a good job at this during a time of just unrest and brokenness. But we're not going to be able to do that if we don't understand what it means to actually glorify God. If we are going to display God to a watching world, if we're going to show God's glory off to a world that desperately needs it, we first and foremost need to understand what that means to glorify God. And so first, I want to just kind of a quick several definitions or kind of getting an understanding of glorifying God before we jump into the text. But first, the Bible, you go through the Bible and you look at this idea of glorifying God, and we're called to glorify God with all things, there's tons of passages just kind of laying that out. When it talks about glorifying God, it's not talking about us taking something of ourselves and using it to give God more. You and I, in and of ourselves, don't have any glory. If I was like, God, I'm going to give you the glory of Jesse, that's like a dirty rag. Okay, I don't, in and of myself, have anything to glorify God with. My glory that I use to glorify God comes from the fact that I'm created in the image of God. And my glory doesn't come from me, it comes from God when it shines out and I reflect upon it to a watching world, and God moves and works. And then as we celebrate, we reflect that back up to God. It is from God and about God. We don't glorify God in and of ourselves, but it comes from God. 2, God glorifies himself when he puts himself on display. God shows himself. When you go through Scripture, there's so many places where God talks about being in the midst of his people. And in fact, when you look at Scripture, God created Adam and Eve to be in his presence. The garden wasn't good because it had all the fruits and vegetables and trees. And, the garden wasn't good because, it was good because God's presence was there. And when Adam and Eve sinned, that was the separation, the ability for God to be in the presence of human beings was broken because of sin. And from that moment on, in Genesis 3, God has been moving closer and closer back to his people. And if you go through the Old Testament, it's God slowly revealing himself a little more until you get to the people of Israel. And then, God is moving in amongst them in the temple. And then you get to the New Testament, the Gospels, and now it's Jesus where God is living among us. And now we get to the New Testament church where we're living today, and not only is God living among us, but God is in us. If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, you have the Holy Spirit at work in you, and you see this is the progression that God has been slowly moving his way back closer to us. Because God is glorified when he displays himself. And so he's been slowly moving back. And then third, God's glory really is the greatest longing that we have. Anytime, in any moment of our life where we feel like something's missing, we feel like something's off, we feel like there's got to be something more. That's a longing to be in the presence of God himself. It's a longing that's not being fulfilled by the glory of God. And every time that we have a desperation for something and there just can't be filled by anything, well, that's right, because there's nothing else to fill it other than God himself. And you see, that's why it is so important that we understand what it means to glorify God, because there's so many broken people in this world desperately looking for something that was lost in the garden that's only going to be found in the person of God in their life, in their midst. And if we're going to be a church that does that, we have to understand that we are meant to glorify God, to put God on full display, to allow people to see God in us. But to do that, our aim has to be in this life to be sealed by the glory of God. Our aim is to be sealed by the glory of God. And that's exactly what Moses gets in Exodus 33. And Moses gives us kind of an understanding of how we have to live our life in such a way where God ends up sealing us with his glory, so that we can display it to a watching world. Now, Exodus 33 is right after the golden calf passage. You know, right after when Moses came down and he told all the people that they were going to build a temple and that God was going to come live among them. And then Moses went back up into the mountain and was up there for 40 days. And all of the people of Israel were kind of freaking out a little bit, trying to figure out what's going on. And so instead of trusting in God and what Moses had told them, they took all of the jewelry that they've just taken from Egypt and melted it down and made a God. And then Moses comes down and he sees this, and God's wrath is poured out and some people die. And now we get to Exodus 33, and this is kind of picking up that mess. And this is picking up right after Moses finally came down. This is Moses' intercession for God's people. Starting in verse 1, it says, "The Lord said to Moses, 'Depart, go up from here, you and the people whom you have brought up out of the land of Egypt, to the land which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, to your offspring I will give it. I will send an angel before you, and I will drive out the Canaanites, and the Amorites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Go up to the land flowing with milk and honey, but I will not go among you, lest I consume you on the way, for you are a stiff-necked people.' When the people heard this disastrous word, they mourned, and no one put on his ornaments. For the Lord had said to Moses, 'Say to the people of Israel, you are a stiff-necked people. For if a single moment I should go among you, I would consume you. So now take off your ornaments, that I may know what to do with you.' Therefore, the people of Israel stripped themselves of their ornaments from Mount Horeb onward." So the first thing that we see in this passage is that the loss of God's presence devastates us. The loss of God's presence devastates us. As Israel, you see, just got done sinning against God after God took them out of Egypt and told them that he was going to live among them. And then they went and spit in his face by building this idol. And so after that, you would think that God would completely wipe them out, but he didn't. Instead, he told Moses, and Moses comes back and starts to talk to God again. And God tells Moses, "Listen, Moses, I'm going to give you everything I promised. I'm going to send you to the promised land, to the land flowing with milk and honey, and all of those people who are living there, all of those countries I'm going to wipe out ahead of you, and I'm going to send you to the very place that I originally told you. But I'm not going to go with you. I'm not going to go with you. In fact, if I'd go with you, I would consume you." And for all of the nation of Israel's faults, and they screwed up really bad, but they got this point right. They got this point right. Even when God gave, you think about like when we screw up and sin against God, but God continues to bless us. A lot of times we think, all right, well, we're good then, because God is, it's not that big of a deal. I'm not losing anything earthly or physical. But they understood where the real problem was. Because the moment that God said, but I am not going to go with you, I'm going to give you all thy promise, but I am not going to go with you, they mourned and fell on their faces. They took their jewelry off. They understood that this was a problem. And even, the story takes a little bit of a turn here. In verse 7, look what it says. It says that Moses used to take the tent and pitch it outside the camp, far off from the camp. And he called it the tent of meeting. And the Lord and anyone who sought the Lord would go out to the tent of meeting, which was outside the camp. Whenever Moses went out to the tent, all the people would rise up, and each would stand at his tent door and watch Moses until he had gone into the tent. And when Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud would descend and stand at the entrance of the tent, and the Lord would speak with Moses. And when the people saw the pillar standing at the entrance of the tent, all the people would rise up and worship, and each at his own tent door. Thus the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend. And when Moses turned into the camp, his assistant Joshua the son of Nun, a young man, would not depart from the tent. So he takes a moment here and goes back to what was kind of currently happening. And so God was not in the presence of Israel. God couldn't be in the presence of Israel. So when people would want to meet with God, they would have to go out. The tent was set up outside of the camp, and it says that several times. But even in that, they understood when Moses was out there, they would go and stand in front of their tents, and they would worship God as Moses was meeting with God himself. But this wasn't the right way. God had just got done telling them back in chapter 24 that he was going to build a temple in their presence. So God's presence wasn't outside of the tent or outside of the camp, but with his people. And so when God said, listen, my presence isn't going to go with you, they understood, man, this is a devastation. This isn't right. God was meant to be among his people. And you and I, a lot of times, we struggle to glorify God because we don't really mourn the fact that we are sometimes outside of God's presence. Now, you and I, if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, if you've accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, the Holy Spirit is in you. And the Holy Spirit lives with you, and you can never be outside of the presence of God, but we can clamp down on that. When we live a certain way, we can live in a way that we are clamping down the presence of God in our life. And a lot of times, one of our biggest problems is that we don't understand that that is a problem. We instead of turning to God in our fears and in our sadness like Israel, we turn to the golden calf. And we turn to our hobbies and our things that bring us pleasure in times of trial. We try to do it and take care of it ourselves, and we don't rely on God. We don't go to the presence of God. And one of the biggest faults, I think, of the church today is exactly what Israel gets right here, is that we don't understand the devastation of not turning to the presence of God. We don't understand how far out we really are when we don't turn into God's presence. It's not a devastation. Every time we look for something greater to meet our desires and our needs in our soul, that's a desire for God. But when we use that desire to go after other things, we are limiting God's presence in our life. And a lot of times we don't really think that, it's not that big of a deal, right? But it is. God himself, who's been moving closer and closer to his people from the moment of Genesis 3, God of the universe, God who has all power, all joy and compassion and hope, everything that we desire flows from God, but we turn to other things. And when we do that, we shut down God's presence in our life, and we really should be devastated by that. Just like the nation of Israel, where they understood, man, this was a problem. A lot of times you and I don't. And we need to understand that it's a big deal. It's kind of like if I lost one of my kids and, we're, wandering around a park or whatever, and Isaiah runs off and, we can't find him for a long time. And it's like, well, it's really not that big of a deal. Like, he's fine, he's 4. It's not a problem. No, it is a problem. Like, my 4-year-old child shouldn't be lost in a park, especially Isaiah. Like, that kid is going to get into so much trouble. Like, that's a devastation. If I can't find him, that's a problem. And immediately, if he's been gone for longer than 5 minutes, I have antennas going off because it's Isaiah, and he's gone. When we look at our own life, and we start to see that, man, I've been turning to things outside of God's presence. I've been turning to my pleasures or my hobbies. I've been turning to my work or this or that, and I don't turn to God. We need to understand that is a devastation. It's destruction in our life, and if we are going to allow God's glory to seal us, we first have to understand that outside of that is a problem. But the two, God's presence is what defines us. Moses picks it back up in verse 12, and he says this. Moses said to the Lord, "See, you say to me, bring up this people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. Yet you have said, I know you by name, and you also have found favor in my sight. Now therefore, if I have found favor in your sight, please show me your ways, that I may know you in order to find favor in your sight. Consider too that the nation is your people." And he said, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." And he, Moses, said to him, "God, if your presence will not go with me, do not bring us up from here. For how shall it be known that I have found favor in your sight, I and your people? Is it not your going with us, so that we are distinct, I and your people, from every other people on the face of the earth?" And the Lord said to Moses, "This very thing that you have spoken I will do, for you have found favor in my sight, and I know you by name." So the second thing, not only do we have to understand that outside of God's presence is devastation, but we also understand that God's presence is what defines us. Moses understood that God's people were nothing outside of God. And Moses, when he goes before God, he doesn't go bringing a bunch of excuses. Well, God, you see, this was a problem. They were afraid of this, and I didn't come back down, and God, the cloud was here, and this was happening, and my job was really difficult, and this was falling apart, and God, all of Moses doesn't do any of that. Moses doesn't bring a single excuse before God. Instead, he just turns to the very person of God. But God, you said. God, you said that you were going to bring up your people. You said that you know me by name. And you've also found favor in my sight. Lord, you said these things. And Moses tells God's promises back to God. You know what that does? God responds, "All right, I'll go with you." But then Moses follows that up. No, God, listen, don't just tell me you're going to go with me. If you're not going to go, God, we're not going anywhere. Why? "For how shall it be known that I found favor in your sight, I and your people? Is it not your going with us, so that we are distinct?" You see, it's the very presence of God that made the nation of Israel anything. See, for the longest time, the nation of Israel didn't have a land. They didn't have a king. In the Old Testament times, a nation was known to be powerful by its landmass. A nation was known because of its king and the king's ability to win wars and protect people. And it was known by the treasury and the army and the lords and all of this. And Israel had absolutely none of that. Everything that defined a country, Israel didn't have. But Moses got it right. Moses said, "Lord, it's not these things, it's you that makes us distinct. You are the very thing that defines us. You are the very thing that makes us different than anything else in this world. And God, if you're not going to go with us, we're not going anywhere, because we're absolutely nothing." And that's true. Moses was 100% right. He fell before the Lord and spoke God's promises back to him because that was the only promise that he could trust. But not only that, but he also understood that that was the only thing that defined the nation of Israel. You see, that brought God glory. Because it wasn't Israel, it was God's protection. It was God's promise. It was God's definition of them. And God responds, listen, I'm going to go with you. Now am I going to go with you? But he tells Moses, I know you by name. And that's not just a simple, like, well, Moses, I know your name. But he's saying, listen, Moses, I know you intricately. The God of heaven, the God of all of the universe, the God who created everything that holds all of this together is saying, I know you personally. Why? Because Moses understood that God is the very thing that defines them. You see, you and I, church, need to understand the exact same thing. If God's glory and God's presence is going to shine in us, we need to understand that it is God that defines us. A lot of times we think, we look around and try to get an understanding of what it means to be a man or a woman in this season and how our world defines, it's by our job or if we've gone to college or if we're married or have a family or have this job or by this hobby or by that sports team, or we have all of these things that we use to define us. And anytime we use one of those things, all we're doing is associating with a broken world. And anytime we use our life to go after those things, we're going after something that's broken. And church, you were created in the image of God. We were created to honor and glorify God. We were created to display the greatest being of all time. And when we choose to define ourselves by these petty little things, everything falls apart. And right now, if we just look out in our world and our culture today, we see that happening. People's lives are falling and breaking because they were defined by so many things that's no longer working. And we have to be defined by the very person of God. And so that means we start to understand that our distinction doesn't come from things around us, but it comes from being in the presence. We were bought with a price. Christ died on the cross on our behalf so that we can be in the presence of God. And so we are doing things that define us by God. That's why when we come into a building like this on Saturday nights or Sunday mornings, we sing songs of praise and worship. Okay, we are putting ourselves before the throne, giving God glory, not saying, I want this, it's mine, I've done all of this and earned this. But instead saying, God, my life is yours, take it. And it's saying that I understand myself in light of God. That's why we fall on our face in prayer. God, I can't pick myself up by my bootstraps and figure this out. Lord, I desperately need you. Lord, if anything is going to be fixed in this world today, it's not going to be because of our government. It's not going to be because of these people or that people, but it's going to be because you showing up and do the things that you do. You being faithful in your church and in your followers living like God in this world. But we do that when we fall on our face in prayer. God, we can't do this. You're allowing God to define you. So when we open up God's word, in this context where it's preached and taught, but it's also when we open up God's word in our own life in the morning or at night and saying, I submit myself under the authority of God because, God, you are the very thing that defines me. I don't get to pick this, Lord, but it's you, and you have that right. So when we proclaim the gospel, when our greatest message isn't the newest workout fad or the newest movement for this or that, but the greatest message that you have really is the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because God is defining you. You see, when we start to do these things and we start to understand, man, my life isn't about all of these things that the world says my life is about. My life is about God's glory. I find who I am in God's glory because I'm created in the image of God, and the only thing that's going to fulfill me is when I stand up for God and who he is. And I don't know about you, but growing up in high school and college, I had a lot of things that really defined me. I had the whole blonde hair, dyed my hair blonde and was, all in that stage. And then I kind of got into this emo punk rock stage and, was dyed black hair. And I was a skater boy for a while and a snowboarder. And, I had this and that. And then I went through all of these stages and did all of these things to try to make myself distinct. And every time that there was something that I felt like defined me more, I went after that more. I tried dressed like it. I acted like it. I tried to find friends in that area. I tried to get good at the things that those people did. And what? Because I wanted to be defined that way. And we still do that with our jobs, with our hobbies. The things that we feel like define us the most, we go after. But church, if we are going to make any difference whatsoever, if we are really going to be made for this time in a way where we display God's glory, we got to understand that it's God's presence that defines you. There is not a greater calling on your life than that. And there should not be a single thing that molds your life more than the person and presence of God. So we need to live in a way where our definition, when we get to know people, when we talk to our neighbors, when we're around our coworkers and our family, one of the first things they start to realize is, man, that person's different because of God. That person has confidence because of God. There's a hope there because of God and because of the work of Jesus and because of heaven. This season isn't affecting them, not because of the security they have in this and that, but because of the foundation they have in the person of Jesus Christ. It's the presence of God that defines us. And then lastly and thirdly, God's glory is what seals us. Look what Moses said, starting in verse 18. And Moses said, "Please show me your glory." And he said, talking about God, and he said, "I will make my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim before you my name, the Lord. And I will be gracious to who I will be gracious, and I will show mercy on whom I will show mercy." But he said, "You cannot see my face, for man shall not see my face and live." And the Lord said, "Behold, there is a place by me where you shall stand in the rock, and while my glory passes by, I will put you in the cleft of the rock, and I will cover you with my hand until you pass by. And then I will take away my hand, and you shall see my back, but my face you will not see." You see, what's happening here is Moses is continuing to press God. God, you've given us these promises. God, your presence is what defines us, Lord. If we lose it, we're devastated. God, you are telling us these things. Don't leave us. And then when God says, "You're right, Moses, I'm going to go with you," then Moses says, "Then show me. Show me your glory." And anytime God promises something, especially in the Old Testament, it would always be sealed by a covenant. There's a bunch of covenants with Abraham and with Isaac and with Jacob. And, when God would promise something, he would give a covenant. With David, there was a covenant. He would promise these things, and he would seal it. But in this moment, what God does, he seals it with his glory. When God says, "Moses, I'm going to go up with you," then Moses is like, "Show me your glory then, God." He doesn't run from that, but he presses into God even deeper. And the idea of a seal, it's like a signet. A king, when they would send a letter and they would want to know that it was from them, they'd melt wax and they'd put that seal on there to know it was from them. In the Old Testament times, a servant or a slave would be branded or sealed with some sort of marking that would show that they were from that kingdom or a servant of that place. A seal was meant to show that that person or that thing was from that person. And here in this moment, God is sealing Moses, showing that Moses is from God by putting God's glory in front of him. Moses understood that the greatest promise was fulfilled when God put his glory on display. And he tells Moses, "Listen, I'm going to do it, but you got to hide in the rock because you can't see my face." No man can see me and live. If you drop down to chapter 34, verse 5, it tells you what happened. It says, then the Lord descended in a cloud and stood in front of them there and proclaimed the name of the Lord. And the Lord passed before him and he proclaimed, the Lord, the God, merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving the iniquity and transgressions and sin, but will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on their children and on the children's children to the third and fourth generation. And see what's happening here. When God's glory goes in front of Moses, all he can do is proclaim the truths of God out. God, you are steadfast love. Your kindness and your mercy, Lord. Your justice is right. What you pour out is right. And then verse 8 it says, and Moses bowed his head toward the earth and worshiped. And he said, if I have found favor in your sight, O Lord, please let the Lord go in the midst of us. For it is a stiff-necked people, and pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us for your inheritance. You see, Moses understood this. He got it that, man, the best thing that any person could do is be in the presence of God as close as possible to the point where God put his seal directly on them by putting his glory in them. That God would seal his people by forgiving them of their sins, by forgiving them of their iniquity, and then being in the midst of them. And church, you and I, we have to understand the same thing. Listen, if we are outside of God's glory, if we're living after so many other things, that's just going to bring destruction on our life because we are defined by God's presence. But as we're being defined by God's presence, God then presses in and seals us by his glory. Because you want to talk about a world that's messed up right now. Like, I don't think I've ever lived in a time when there's so much turmoil and angst in so many people. And all you got to do is open up Twitter or your news and just see all of the opinions from left and right. It just feels like everything is broken. And there's nothing that's going to put this back together. But church, there's one thing that's going to hold us together, and that's the very person of God. And the more that we're sealed by God's glory, the more that we understand his loving kindness and his mercy and his justice, his abounding and steadfast love, the more that we understand how God cares for us, the more that you and I are going to be able to say to a watching world, look at how good God is. Why? Because we're sealed by God. We're sealed by his glory. So that means, church, the first and most prominent way that God shows his glory is through Scripture. If you and I are going to allow God's glory to be sealed in us, God has revealed himself in this book. And God has said time and time again, listen, this is who I am. I want to show you my glory and lay it upon you. So we come under God's word. We worship God. That's why we spend significant amount of time singing songs of praise, of putting ourselves before God, because it allows, when we walk into the house of God in praise, we see God's glory. Man, when some of the times where I have been most impacted by God is when I am worshiping God. When I see God to a greater degree, when I'm singing praises, just like Moses did when he goes before God. He doesn't give any excuses. He just promises they promise back to God the promises God had given them. And when we sing songs of worship, that's exactly what we're doing. Giving the very things back to God. And when we do that, God is sealing us and showing us his glory. Answered prayer. When we fall on our knees and pray to God and see God working through his prayer. That's God pressing into us. Being around God's people. That's why God has given us the church. Again, like I was saying earlier, if you are a follower of Jesus, you have the Holy Spirit in you. God is at work among you, and when we gather together, we get a greater picture of who God is. And we get to see God moving, and there have been times, there's times all the time where I'm tired, and I don't want to be around other people, and I don't want to be a life group, or I want to go to church, or I have this meeting or that meeting, and I'm just don't want to do it. And it's just even for the pastor, it's hard to get here sometimes. And then I get around God's people, and it's like, man, I'm changed again and again. Why? Because that's God revealing, God sealing, God showing off his glory in his people. God's creation, when we go out and just look and see what God has done and look at how God has put this world together, God has put his glory on display. And there have been moments in my life where I've just been standing in awe at a mountaintop or in front of an ocean or just seeing the stars in the sky and just be blown away by who God is and how God has displayed himself in his creation. That's God sealing himself in us. God shows us his glory, but we need to be striving after it. The greatest thing that you and I can do in this life and for this life and for those around us is to understand how to glorify God. Our greatest desires is found in the glory of God. Our greatest ability to point other people to a loving Savior is found in displaying the glories of God. Your capacity to care for a broken world is only going to be found in the glory of God and in the presence of God. So, church, we need to be going after that. And at first, it starts by understanding. That the loss of God's presence is devastating. So often we don't even really think about the things that we do that keep us from the presence of God, and then we don't act like it's a big deal, but we need to start to understand anytime I sacrifice God's presence for something else in this life, that's a devastation. We are trading something that's broken and falling apart for something that's perfect and holy. And we need to get that, Lord, that's a devastation. But then that we're defined by God's presence. The more time that we spend in God's presence, the more we're defined by that. And we need to allow that to be at work in us. And then ultimately that as we are in and being defined by God's presence, God is sealing us with his glory. So that we go out, people are like, man, that person is different. Because they've been with God. In the New Testament, in 2 Corinthians, Paul reminds us, I was reading this passage earlier this afternoon when we were spending time praying before the service. And it says, yes, to this day, when Moses is revealed, a veil lies over their hearts. And talk about the people of Israel, when they would go before Moses after he had been with God, Moses had put a veil over in front of his face because of God's glory, and they were afraid of it. But verse 16 it says, but when one turns to the Lord, when someone comes to know God as their Lord and Savior, that veil is removed. And now the Lord is spirit, where the spirit of the Lord is found, there is freedom. And we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. You see, we're transformed not by doing all of these things, but by beholding the glory of the Lord. Our greatest transformation, our greatest foundation, our greatest hope and joy and blessing doesn't come from doing the right things. It comes from being in the very presence of God. So, church, if we're going to do this right, we need to seek God's presence. John and is going to come back up and do another song, and even as we do this song, I would just encourage you to just even think about your life. What are the things that you are doing, that you're going after, that are outside of God? The things that are defining you, the things that are stealing God's presence from you. And even as we're singing this last song, just take a moment and just confess those things. God, I'm sorry that I've allowed my heart to go after these things. God, I'm sorry that I've allowed so many things to build up. And God, that just like the nation of Israel, I've gone after that golden calf. God, just forgive me. And then even just as we sing this song, just allow, a lot of times when we get to the last song, I know I'm fall right into this camp sometimes. I'm already thinking about what's coming next, what I'm having for dinner, or what I'm doing after this. But don't do that. Even as we sing this last song, just allow it to draw you into the very presence of God, and allow it, as we sing these truths back to God, to define your life. Let it just be a prayer in your heart as we go out, and then even as we go about this week, just take some time and just think about these songs that we're reading or singing in the scripture that we're going over, and just allow that to define you. And then just like Moses did, say, God, show me your glory. God, as you revealed yourself to me, seal me with your glory and show me with your glory so I can display you to a watching world. God, we come before you again tonight. And God, we just thank you for this opportunity to open up your word. And God, I just pray, Lord, that we would be a church that's about your glory. And God, as we live in a world that's, God, just in a tough place, in a country it just feels like it's broken and shattering, Lord, we pray that we wouldn't lean into other things, but God, that we would lean into your glory and your presence. God, I pray that as we walk out of here, people would see it different, so that they would see a foundation and a hope that doesn't come from anything in this life. God, a steadfast love and a mercy that can only come from a God who's displayed it before. God, I pray that you would teach us to define ourselves by you. God, that we would sing songs of praise and open up scripture. And God, just when we need to understand who we are, we would look to you, Lord. And God, that we'd be sealed by that glory. And God, we just pray even tonight and even this weekend, God, that you would give us opportunities to glorify you by displaying you to a watching and broken world. And Lord, I just pray even for anybody in here right now, Lord, who, God, their heart is just longing for something and they've been looking and fighting and searching. God, I pray that in this moment they would find you, Lord. Understand that that desire has been a desire for your presence and your glory. God, I pray for any believer in here, Lord, who knows they've been going after the wrong thing, that have been filling their heart and soul with the things of this life, defining themselves by the things of this world. And God, I pray that you would just be compassionate and loving and just remind them, remind all of us, Lord, of how you came down and you have been pushing yourself nearer and nearer to us through the death and resurrection of your Son for us. And God, I pray that you would then just instill in us, God, a fire for you because we've seen your glory. God, we just, like Moses, we just fall on our face and just declare the truths of you back to you. Say, God, we're broken, but we desperately need you. Let us be your inheritance, God. Let us be your inheritance.